What does one say after 25 years, the final sermon? It seems that a very busy businessman, such as we have in this parish, once went to a holy man and said, teach me something. My business is very full. I'm kind of being pushed around by life and business and family. Help me. And as he was talking, the holy man was pouring the tea. And the tea was spilling over the cup. And the businessman stopped and said, wait, what are you doing? And the holy man said, I'm doing exactly what you're doing. You're allowing your cup to spill over with all this ego stuff, opinions, desires, so forth. When you learn to empty the cup, you won't have to come to me. You can pour tea to somebody else. I suppose in the 25 years I've been with you, if I've tried to do anything, it's to encourage you to learn how to empty your cup. And in thinking back on it, I decided there were 3 themes that you have had to put up with ad nauseam. So I thought, as long as you're already nauseous, I will give it to you once more. The first thing, we cannot grow spiritually or psychologically until we learn to carry the opposites. That is the sine qua non of any kind of development. Once we begin to learn to carry the opposites, we begin the first step that ultimately will enable us to empty the teacup. And I thought I would like to use a picture for this theme and maybe a couple of others. I'm going to give you pictures, by the way, were defined, I think, most poignantly by a 4-year-old girl who was asked by a British art critic once, how do you draw a picture? She paused for a minute. She said, I have a think, and then I draw a line. So I'm going to have a think and draw a line. The first picture has to do with the young woman standing on a balcony in the lower Himalayas looking out over this incredible scenery. She's come from America, and she's young, wealthy, and feeling life has no meaning. And the holy man of the ashram comes out and stands next to her, and she says, I'm thinking I'll probably commit suicide. There's not much left. And he says, suicide's no solution. Death is no solution. She turns to him and says kind of acidly, well, I suppose you think life is a solution. And he smiles and shrugs and says, who says there has to be a solution? That is the beginning, learning to carry the opposites. When I was in seminary, on a Sunday, I used to visit I worked for St. John, Broadgate Square, and I used to visit the old people in all of the homes around there, and I always arranged it so that late on Sunday afternoon I'd end up at the Phillips Gallery where they had a string quartet, and we'd sit under this great El Greco and a few other things and listen to this music. When it was over, I'd run upstairs while the sun was setting and whip into the room filled with impressionists, hoping I'd get the sun coming in when we hit that magnificent canvas of Renoir, the voting party, which would just explode through the whole room. Then I'd soak all that up till the sun went down, and I'd go across the hall. I had a room of a person I didn't know at the time, but I was always fascinated. I never could leave without spending time with him. His name was George Brock. The entire room was filled with drawings. And later on, I read something he said. He said, I never look at the object. I only look at the space in between. That is where it is to be free. And in different terms, you see, he's already saying we must learn to live at the opposites. Many times I have talked with you about the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty, and a number of you get on my case for that, saying it doesn't seem to fit. But it really does, if you think about it. I just have never been able to explain it, I probably can't today. But in physics, it simply means that a particle can be located, but if you locate it, you can't determine its velocity. If you determine its velocity, then you can't locate it. Exactly the same principle can apply to theology. You can have a universal theory of truth, whatever you want. God is good. There shall be none other gods but me, or any other great theory. But the moment you try to apply it to a particular situation, you're in trouble. You cannot say that any given situation manifests that truth. Not a single human situation will guarantee that. Or if you turn it around, you can take any given human situation and say, in this situation, I have examined all the possible ingredients. Not that we could do it theoretically. Even if we could do that, we could not then extrapolate that into a universal truth. It can't be done. So we live in the same principle of uncertainty in theology and ethics as physics has to live. Take one example from ethics. You could be a person who has a right to life. So you could say, in all cases, there is no argument for abortion. But I know personally cases where even the most dyed-in-the-wool right-for lifer would have difficulty supporting that principle. You cannot do it that way. On the other hand, you could turn the thing around and say, in this particular instance, this child, for instance, one case I know, a child who was 10 years old, was pregnant. In this particular instance, an abortion is appropriate. But then you can't take that and turn it into a universal truth. So we live in that same place that George Brock was talking about. We live in the spaces and we carry the opposites, and we must have the courage to do that. It's only cowardice that puts a person into one place or another and then tries to tell all the rest of the world, this is truth with a capital T. That is immaturity that readily grows into evil. Ronald Knox was the Roman Catholic chaplain in Oxford for a number of years. He died a year before I got there. He once said, I have come to the conclusion that you cannot come to the conclusion. You stand in the spaces, you carry the opposites. One time, scientists came to Knox and was trying to impress on him his point of view, and he said, now listen here, there are millions and millions of suns and planets out there. Are you going to tell me that just by sheer statistics, it is unlikely that one of them, such as the one we're on, has produced human life. That just happens. And Knox stopped for a moment and he said, you know, that argument may apply all right in some respects. But he said, imagine now if you were talking to the head of Scotland Yard, and he might tell you there are millions and millions of automobiles with trunks in the city of London. And isn't it likely that in one of those trunks there is a body that some murderer has put there? And then Knox paused and said, but you can't tell me that that superintendent of Scotland Yard wouldn't want to know who put it there. So there is no place to stop. We are always in the spaces. There is always some place to move. I think if I had to call it something, I would call it the principle of detachment. That is what we have to develop in order to be mature and carry the opposite.